Last class we had talked about Newton's law of viscosity, and we generalized this equation in the form tau nt is equal to mu times dvt by dxn. And here we had clearly specified n was the direction of the area. And what we mean by direction of area was direction of line which is normal or perpendicular to the area, and T was the direction of shear, and which was the tangential direction. Now we had seen an example there, and where what we had assumed was that if we have a flow like this, where the top plate, flow between two plates, top plate is moving with a velocity v and the bottom plate is fixed, and this gap is h. We may have called it delta in the last class if the gap is h. Then we will be able to show this later in the course, that if the flow is caused only because of movement of the top plate, in that case the velocity profile, so if we call this as x and if we call this as y, u of y, x component of velocity in the y direction, this can be given as v times y over h, which means that there is a linear profile of velocity. And here actually, if you realize this equation, what we have done is u of y, because there is a linear profile, we write it in the form ay plus b, and then use boundary conditions at y is equal to 0, u is equal to 0, at y is equal to h, u is equal to capital U, to get the above relation, or u is equal to, this I should put it as v. So now this relation is valid only if the flow is caused by movement of the top plate, that is what is causing the flow. And if the flow is caused by a pressure difference between inlet and outlet, then the profile is not linear. Actually, we can show that the profile for such fluids would be quadratic. So therefore, this linear. Now, other thing which we made was, if there's a curved flow in a curved channel, if the gap was thin, that is delta was much less than L, then we assumed a linear profile. So this was the approximation, but once again, the flow has to be only because of the movement of the surface and not because of a pressure difference. In case of a pressure difference, the linear approximation is not valid even for a thin flow. Now we had also seen the dimensions and units of mu. The dimension of mu was m by LT, and in SI units, this turns out to be equal to Pascal seconds. We also have a unit which is commonly used in industry, poise, and 1 poise is equal to 10 to the power of minus 1 Pascal second. And then there is another commonly used unit, centipoise, CP, and this is equal to 10 to the power of minus 3 Pascal seconds. If we look at viscosity mu for some common fluids, just to get an idea, and this is at normal conditions of temperature and pressure. Then what we find is for water, mu is equal to 10 to the power of minus 3 Pascal second. For air, this is equal to 1.85 into 10 to the power of minus 6 Pascal second. And for gasoline, this is equal to 0.29 into 10 to the power of minus 3 Pascal second. For mercury, this is equal to 1.55 into 10 to the power of minus 3 Pascal second. But if we look at it for the value of mu for motor oil, or which is a very viscous fluid, and here we look at the brand called SAE 30, then this is equal to 440 into 10 to the power of minus 3 Pascal seconds. So here we realize, when we look at these values, the value of viscosity for motor oil is about 500 times more than that of water, but water itself, its viscosity is about 1000 times more or 500 times more than that of air. So these are just some effects. Now we have talked of Newtonian fluids, but then we can also have a classification of fluids based on the stress and rate of strain relationship. And this is often sometimes called the rheological diagram. So here what we do is we plot the applied shear stress on the y-axis and the rate of strain, which is dvx by dy, on the x-axis. So clearly, for Newtonian fluid, this behavior is like a straight line, which means as the stresses increase, the rate of strain also increases, and the slope gives us the value of the coefficient of viscosity. Now, all fluids do not behave like this. If we have a fluid, what we call as the ideal fluid or inviscid fluid, these are fluids where viscosity is neglected. That means mu will be equal to 0. So clearly, ideal fluids will just be following the x-axis. So this is how the graph will look for an ideal fluid. But then all fluids are not Newtonian. There are some fluids which follow a curve like these. These fluids are called dilatant or shear thickening fluids. In dilatant fluids, viscosity increases as the rate of deformation increases. And so that means as you try to deform the fluid more, it becomes more resistant to deformation. And an example of this would be a solution of sand. Actually, this would be a mixture of sand and water. So solution may not be the right word. A mixture of sand and water. Okay. Now there are fluids of the other type, which when you apply when the shear strain increases, they tend to become less viscous. And such fluids are called pseudoplastic. So these fluids follow a curve like this. These are called pseudoplastic or shear thinning fluids. So pseudoplastics fluids are ones where the fluid becomes less viscous as shear strain rate increases. You must have come across an example when you take a new paint and you try to stir it. Initially the paint seems very hard, but as you stir it, it becomes easier to mix, and that would be an example of a pseudoplastic or a shear thinning fluid. Then there are certain other materials which start to behave like a fluid only after some finite shear force has been applied. Can you think of a fluid like this which initially behaves like a solid, but after a finite shear has been applied to it, it starts to flow? And an example of this is toothpaste, where the paste starts to flow like a fluid only after a finite force has been applied to this. So now these fluids, if we try to plot them on the shear stress versus rate of strain graph, they would behave like this. So here, if we have a linear fluid of this type, it would behave like this, where the stress as a function of strain, initially for a finite stress, the fluid will not deform, but after that it starts to deform. So this is like a linear behavior follows after that. This is called a Bingham plastic. Now, of course, the behavior need not be linear. It could be like a dilatant or a thixotropic fluid also, or a pseudoplastic fluid. So all this is possible, and this is how. So these are basically what we call as plastic fluids, where in solids also you have this effect of plasticity, where the solid starts to flow after a particular amount of stress has been applied to it. So now we have seen this Newton's law of viscosity, and we have seen these fluids. Now let us look at another concept, the concept of continuum in a fluid. Or actually this works for any material. Now, what we mean by a continuum is that when we look at properties of a solid or a fluid or any material, then properties such as viscosity, density, temperature, velocity, pressure, we assume these to be a continuous function of x, y, z in time. That is, we assume these properties are continuous functions of space. Such an assumption, so for example, we look at density, rho, we will assume rho can be defined as a continuous function. Now, for this to be valid, the probe which measures the property, and probably this will become more obvious if I look at, let's say we are measuring we measure temperature. Now temperature will be measured by the tip of the thermometer. So if the tip is such that it contains large number of fluid molecules, then it will measure temperature, which is average of these large number of molecules. So what we assume when we say that fluid is a continuous function, so properties are continuous functions of space. This implies that the measuring volume contains large number of molecules whose property is being measured. If suppose the probe size is of the same order as the molecule size, then it will measure the property of a molecule when it is in contact. When it is not in contact, it will not measure that. So it will give widely fluctuating results. But let us see if these things are valid or not. If we look at air at STP, air at STP contains 10 to the power of let's look at a volume of size 10 to the power of minus 9 millimeter cube of air. Now this would correspond to a probe linear size of 10 to the power of minus 3 millimeters, which is 1 micron. And in 1 micron we have approximately 3 to the power of 10 to the power of 7 molecules of air. So if our probe is of the order of linear size 1 micron, it will still contain 10 to the power of 7 molecules whose properties, average property, will be measured by the probe. And therefore, if our measuring volume sizes are of this length, then the continuum assumption is valid. That means we can assume the properties to be continuous functions of space. Then the question we ask is, are there situations where continuum assumption is not valid? And for that, if we look at gases, then we have a term called which you may have seen in thermodynamics, and there's a term called the mean free path. The mean free path is the distance by which a molecule travels on an average before it hits another molecule. And this mean free path, we use the symbol lambda for this. Now, if probe size is A, or A is the typical length size, probe size will be definitely smaller than the typical length size in the flow. So then, if lambda by A is less than 1, then continuum assumption is a reasonably good assumption. And this lambda by A is often called the Knudsen number. We'll come across many of these non-dimensional quantities which are called numbers here. So if the Knudsen number is much less than 1, continuum assumption is valid. Now, which are the cases where continuum assumption is not valid? Continuum not valid. And one possibility of this would be what we call rarefied gas dynamics, where the gas is very thin, or you can call it, the correct technical word is rarefied. That means the molecules of the gas are far apart. So this would be a situation in near vacuum, when the molecules would be very far apart, and this we would probably expect to see in outer space. So in this case, lambda would be large. Even if A stays to be the same, the distance which one molecule travels before it hits another molecule, this will be large, and in this case, continuum may not be valid. The second is a new branch, and that is what we called nanomechanics, where we talk of fluid flow in nano channels. So these channels are very thin, of the order of 10 to the power of minus 9 meters. That's the diameter. So here, when there is flow, then it is on the molecular scale. So their continuum assumption will not be valid. In this course, we will look at cases where continuum is valid. But there are methods based on statistics which are used for cases where continuum is not valid. And one of them we call the lattice Boltzmann method, and the other one we refer to as molecular dynamics. So these are the tools we use which are statistics based, where you talk of statistics of large number of molecules, and you use these tools to study the properties and in case where continuum is not valid. Now let us look at some thermodynamic properties of fluids. So we look at pressure, density, and temperature. You would be familiar with these terms. There are some more terms I will use. U, internal energy. Some of these definitions you will see in the course on thermodynamics. Then there's a term called enthalpy. And these are all properties at a point. All these properties we are looking at S, entropy, and sometimes these are also written as specific properties at a point. So if the total energy, internal energy is capital U, divide that by the mass, you will get the internal energy. And then there are two more terms, Cp and Cv. These are specific heat. One is at constant pressure, and this is at constant volume. So we have the specific heats, and then of course there are these coefficients, mu, coefficient of viscosity, we have K, the coefficient of thermal conductivity. All these, some of the terms you will see in this course, others you will see in other courses. Now, what thermodynamics tells us is that a pure substance in single phase, so for example, we look at one particular gas in a single phase, then the properties depend on at most two of the above variables. So for example, if we look at coefficient of viscosity, then this would be at best a function of temperature and pressure. And we have the relation for ideal gas. For ideal gas, we have P is equal to rho RT. This is all when you have an equilibrium, you have equilibrium thermodynamics. This relation P is equal to rho RT, unless given otherwise, we'll assume air also to be an ideal gas. And then we have a universal gas constant R is equal to Cp minus Cv. R is called the universal gas constant, and R for a particular gas will be equal to R universal divided by molecular mass for that gas. And if we look at some of these properties For liquids, let's say for water, rho density is nearly treated to be a constant, and this will be is 998 kilograms per meter cube. Cp is 4210 meter square per second Kelvin. And for air at STP, density is equal to 1.22 kilograms per meter cube. For calculations, we will in this course use density of water as 1000 kilograms per meter cubes. So these are some of the way how properties behave. Now for liquids, density of a liquid decreases slightly. So density of a liquid will decrease with an increase of temperature. So decreases with an increase in temperature T. And this normally we will neglect, but in some problems fluid flow is caused when there is a big temperature difference, the density decreases, causing the hot air or hot fluid to move up. But if we look at the pressure, so in case if this has to be accounted for, then in liquids we have a relation P divided by P0 is equal to B plus 1 times rho by rho 0 to the power n minus B. So this is a relation between P and rho for a liquid. Now in the above relation, B is nearly 3000, N is equal to 7, and we use different this thing. As we have seen for other properties, we can also look at this now, property of variation of viscosity. And what we find is mu of gas is a function of temperature, and we have a power law which tells us mu divided by mu 0 is equal to T divided by T0 to the power n. This is the power law, and there is another law called Sutherland's law of viscosity, which we use for gases. Both of these are valid for gases. So Sutherland's law tells us mu divided by mu 0 is equal to T divided by T0 to the power of 3 by 2 into T0 plus S divided by T plus S, and both N and S are constants. And what we find is that, so this is the how viscosity varies with temperature in gases. In liquids, mu decreases as temperature increases. In gases, it is the other way around, and this follows some sort of a law like A times exponential minus Bt, but normally we can treat mu to be constant. Now, as far as variation of viscosity with pressure goes, variation of mu with P, then mu of both gases and liquids rises as pressure increases. But these are minor changes, and unless the change in pressure is many times, it can be neglected. Next, we talk of a very particular description, the two types of description in fluid mechanics. So here, so far we have seen the properties. Now we will look at two types of description in fluid mechanics. And these are mainly what we can probably call as kinematical descriptions. The first approach we talk of is called the particle approach, and this is something which we have seen. This is basically we follow a fluid particle and observe the change in property of that particle. So we may do it for a single particle or we may do it for a group of particles. So there is a particular particle of fluid, we measure its velocity at time t, we measure the velocity of the same particle. So now we follow the same particle and we measure its velocity at time t plus delta t. And you obviously know that the rate of change of velocity, for example, if it is of the same particle, we call it as acceleration. And if we follow particles, for the time derivative, we will use d by dt, which is what we have been using, or sometimes in fluid mechanics text, you will see the time derivative is also, we use capital D by dt. So this is the particle approach, and here this particle approach is also called a Lagrangian approach. Now, a particle approach may not be the best approach when we talk of a fluid. For example, I look at flow through a bend. Then if I talk of a particle 1, particle will come in the bend at the inlet and leave from outlet. After that, this particle has nothing to do with the bend. But if we want to find forces on a bend, this may not be the best approach. And so the second approach which we have for fluid mechanics is called the field approach. And in a field approach, let's use the generic symbol beta for the property of a fluid. So beta could be anything. Beta could be a scalar or a vector or a tensor. So it could be, let's say, the pressure, it could be density, it could be temperature, it could be velocity, it could be acceleration, it could be the shear stress. So beta can be any general property of a fluid. Then in a field approach, the property beta, which is any property, is specified as a function of x, y, z, t. As a function of space and time. And what this means is that a fluid particle occupying the space xyz at time t has the property beta of xyzt. So this is how we measure a field property. So to measure a field property, we put in a probe in the fluid and measure property as a function of time. And not only this, we insert many probes at different locations. Each probe gives beta of x1, y1, z1 at time t. So this is where the probe has been put, and notionally or as a mind exercise we put another. So this will give us the property at x1. This probe will measure, this probe which has been shown here will measure beta at x1, y1, z1 as a function of time. So this is how we measure field properties, and field properties are also called Eulerian properties. So, or the field approach is called Eulerian approach. So this is, as we'll see, is very different from the earlier approach. Now, related to this, let's define a term called steady flow. Steady flow is a flow where partial beta by partial t is equal to 0, where beta, as defined before, is any property of the fluid. So in general we have beta as a function of x, y, z, t if beta depends only on space and not on time. The flow is said to be steady. And you can also see this when we say partial beta by partial t is equal to 0. What is the meaning of partial by partial t? This means that other variables, so beta is a function of 4 independent variables, x, y, z, t, and when we say partial beta by partial t, this means other variables are kept constant. So if at a particular location you measure a property of fluid, you find it does not change in time, and this happens everywhere, then we say the flow is steady. So for example, now let's see an example. Suppose we have flow in a converging channel. Some of you may know it from previous knowledge or experience, but others will see it in this course. If this velocity is V1 at the inlet and it is V2 at the outlet, and if we observe with time, at each location V does not change with time. And if we can say this for all properties, then, and if other properties follow same, that is, they don't change with time at any given location, so then flow is steady. But this does not mean that fluid particle velocity is constant. While velocity at one position does not change with time, it does not mean particles have a constant velocity. For example, a particle here has a velocity v1, and as it travels downstream, eventually at the exit the velocity becomes v2. So individual fluid velocity may change, but if we observe at one location, the properties will not change. Similar to this, just as we have this concept in time, in space we have this concept of dimensionality, and we can define things to be one-dimensional, two-dimensional, or three-dimensional. And what we mean by, let's say, a 3D flow will mean all three components of velocity are non-zero, and beta, any fluid property, is a function of x, y, z. So beta is any fluid property. And in general, if we write velocity is equal to Vxi plus Vyj plus Vzk, this is one notation, or we can also use for velocity Ui plus Vj plus Wk, another notation, or a third notation, we can use V1i plus V2j plus V3k, or sometimes we could use U1i plus U2i plus U3k. So these would be index notations where I denotes the direction, and these are some other notations, so all of them mean the same thing. So in 3D flow, Vx, Vy, Vz in general would be functions of x, y, z. And other properties also would be functions of x, y, z. They can or may not be functions of time, that will make it steady or unsteady, but this is three-dimensional. Now when we talk of two-dimensional flow, in two-dimensional flow, we will have beta would only be a function of two dimensions, x and y. And in this case, when we talk of velocity, we will say velocity has only two components, x, y, I plus Vy of x, y, j. So the time component may or may not be there. That will decide steady but not unsteady. In general, time will be there. So this is Vx of, let me write this clearly again, Vx of x, y, t, I plus Vy of x, y, t, j. This is two-dimensional flow, and sometimes we have 1D flow. In 1D flow, fluid properties are only a function of one spatial component. So, and velocity v will be equal to vx is a function of xi. So, this is how we define one-dimensional, two-dimensional, and three-dimensional flows. And next we talk of concepts for graphical description of flow. How do we visualize the flow and how do we write mathematical equations for the qualitative markers which are present in a flow. And for this, if you really, graphical description of flow tells us many things about the flow. It tells us it gives many features about the flow. And an example of this is if you have seen smoke from a chimney or smoke from an incense stick. So if you have an incense stick which is burning and it releases smoke, then the smoke pattern can tell us the smoke pattern can tell us many things, about the flow of air in which the smoke spreads. If the pattern of the smoke is very uniform, like a single line, that would tell us that air is just flowing very straight. But if we find this pattern of the smoke to be, it follows a random type of pattern, then it tells us that air in this area is mixing. So these things can be studied by graphical methods, and we have three quantities which we use, which are typically used in fluid mechanics. One is called the streamlines, path lines, and streak lines. So there are these three concepts. I will introduce them briefly today, and in the next lecture we will see the mathematical description. We'll end this today by giving you what each of these mean and maybe a simple qualitative example. And the quantitative examples of these will be taken in the next lecture and in the tutorials. So let us look at a two-dimensional flow where velocity is equal to Vxi plus Vy j. We'll not assume the flow to be steady, so we'll use time also to start with. So now streamline, the first concept of this is a very instantaneous concept. That means at each time we have different streamlines if the flow changes with time. And these are similar to magnetic lines of force. Tangent to the streamline is parallel to the direction of the velocity of fluid at that point. So, for example, if the velocity at this point is like this, velocity at this point is like this, streamline here will be, the tangent to the streamline will give you the direction of velocity. So therefore, if the velocity field is equal to u of x, y, z, t, I plus v of x, y, z, t, j, so we'll not take z here, we'll assume it's two-dimensional flow. So then the direction of velocity is given by the tangent to the streamline. Tangent to the streamline means dy by dx of the streamline. This is parallel to the direction of the velocity. So therefore this will be equal to v of x, y, t divided by u of x, y, t. Because v by u will give us the tangent which the velocity vector makes with the x-axis at that time, and that is the same as that of the tangent to the streamline. And in this, t is like a constant. And when we have to find streamlines, the initial, so we have to, the problem will state something like find the streamline passing through x0, y0 at time t is equal to tau. So in case of a streamline, time is just a constant, and what you have to do is you have to use the initial condition when x is equal to x0, y is equal to y0. So this is the sort of initial condition which will be used. So this is what a streamline is. Next, let's look at the equation for a, or the concept of a path line. Path line is the path followed by a fluid particle. So in terms of the description or definition, it is a very simple concept. Path followed by a fluid particle. So when we talk of path followed by a fluid particle, we have to specify which particle it is. And how do we specify when we talk in terms of field properties? So we will say path followed by particle which is at x0, y0 at time t is equal to t0. So once we have this description, we can find the path line. We identify this particle which was here at t0 as it moves in the flow. What is its path which it follows will give us the equation of a path line. And to find the equation of a path line, if the velocity field is given by, if the velocity field is, as we have seen, is given by u of I, u is the x component, and then we have the y component is V. So if this is the X component, I'll just get back to my pencil. So this is the velocity field. So then what happens is, for the path of a particle, you write the general equation dxp by dt is equal to u of and dyp by dt is equal to v of xp yp comma t. And now here you will specify at x is equal to x0 at t is equal to t0, the particle is at x is equal to x0, and at t is equal to t0, the particle is at y0. So with these, you integrate these, you will get x as a function of time, y as a function of time, and this will give you the parametric equation of the path line. Next, let us look at a streak line. A streak line is basically, what it says is that this is if particles have passed through a point x0 comma y0. There's a particular point in space where different fluid particles have passed. Then at a later time t, you join all these particles, and this line is what we call as a streak line. So here, this is basically, we have these particles which pass through x0, y0 at time tau, where tau t0 is less than. You're observing the streak line at tf. So the particles which passed x0, y0 at time tau, where tau is varying from t0 to tf, and at tf you look at all these particles and join them. This gives you a streak line. Now it looks a bit complicated, but if we try to look at it in terms of equations in physical, if you have to make a streak line, this becomes the easiest. For example, if you have flow of water and you put a KMnO4 particle. So put a particle of potash in the flow. Now the potash particle settles down, stays at the same line, and the red color which you see, this is a streak line, because all these particles which are forming the red line, they pass through this location of where the potash particle was. So in these cases, streak lines can be, in terms of physical experiments, these will be easy to formulate. Another way of visualization is for flows in water, if you put a wire across the water and you pass current through this, then hydrogen bubbles are released. And so hydrogen bubbles are released from the wire, and at each location hydrogen bubbles are there. So therefore these hydrogen bubbles, if you look at the pattern, they represent streak lines. The last thing for today, just think about it. In a steady flow, streamlines, streak lines and path lines are all identical. They will be the same. So with this I end today's class. We'll meet again and talk somewhat more about this, and then we will move on to hydrostatics. Thank you very much.